Have you ever asked yourself a question like this? If there were a being believed to be the strongest in the world, and even that being faced a power it could not control, then who would hold the true power? Zeus rules the sky in Greek mythology. He throws lightning, shakes the heavens, and stands above gods and mortals alike. But even Zeus meets a force he cannot fully escape. That force is fate. Picture the scene for a moment. Zeus sits on the throne of Olympus. With one gesture, clouds split apart. With one burst of anger, thunder rolls across the world. He defeats monsters, crushes rebellion, and makes even kings fear his name. And yet, behind that great throne, three quiet figures stand in silence. One spins a thread, one measures its length, the last waits with the power to bring it to an end. They do not shout. They do not carry famous weapons. They do not need to. In many Greek myths, they represent the power that decides where every life begins, how far it goes, and where it stops. And that may be more terrifying than any storm. That is what makes this story so powerful. Strength can win battles. Anger can destroy cities. A king can rule with force. But none of that matters if the ending has already been set. You can fight an enemy. You can hide from danger. But how do you fight the end of your own story? In Greek mythology, these three goddesses are tied to the image of life as a thread. One begins it, one measures it, one decides when it reaches its end. Birth, time, and death are all held inside that one simple image. And maybe that is why the idea lasts in the mind. It is so simple that it feels almost too honest. We like to think of life as a great plan, a big dream, something we build with our own hands. But this myth quietly says something colder. Every life has a beginning. Every life has a limit. And that limit may not belong to us. That is where the fear begins. Many gods in myth change the world through power. They stir up wars, flood the seas, send sickness, or drive people into love and madness. But the fates do not work like that. They do not need armies. They do not need thunder. They do not need to chase anyone down. Their power is quieter than that. They are tied to endings. And endings do not need to run after us. Sooner or later, we all walk toward them on our own. That is why they feel different from other divine figures in Greek myth. Their fear is not the fear of violence. It is the fear of something you cannot move around, bargain with, or outrun. And if we are honest, that kind of fear still feels familiar. A loud noise may startle us, but it fades quickly. Waiting for test results, sitting in silence before an important call comes in, feeling a relationship slip away even though part of you still wants to hold on. Those moments stay with us longer. They carry a kind of helplessness that is harder to shake. The power of fate in myth feels a lot like that. It is not just danger. It is the moment you realize there is a current moving beneath your life. And no amount of force can fully stop it. So was Zeus truly helpless before the fates? This is where the story becomes even more interesting. Because Greek mythology does not give one neat, simple answer. In some traditions, Zeus seems to stand above fate, or at least guide it. He can appear as the ruler of a world where order itself moves through his will. In that version, he is not just the king of the gods. He is the face of cosmic order. But other stories point in a very different direction. In those, prophecy matters even to Zeus. What has been foretold still casts a shadow over him. He can respond to it. He can work around it. He can shape choices inside it. But he cannot always erase it. And that tension is exactly what makes these myths feel so rich. If Zeus could change everything whenever he wanted, then fate would mean very little. But if fate were so absolute that even the gods had no room to act, then the myths would lose much of their drama. Instead, Greek myth leaves the question open. Zeus is mighty, but not without limits. Fate is powerful, but it is not always given one clear face. So the stories keep pulling us back to the same question. Who truly rules this world? One of the sharpest examples comes through prophecy. In one famous thread of myth, a warning appears about a child who would one day grow greater than his father. That detail matters. The threat is not a monster standing at the gate. It is not an army marching uphill. It is a future that has not arrived yet. And that is much harder to fight. Zeus can defeat monsters. He can crush rebellion. But how do you battle a possibility that has not even taken shape? So instead of meeting it head on, he moves carefully around it. He avoids the path that would allow that future to happen. And that tells us something important. When even the strongest figure in Greek mythology chooses caution over confrontation, we can feel the weight of fate. The most frightening powers are not always the ones you strike. Sometimes they are the ones you work around. Because you know force will not be enough. There is another kind of moment that hits just as hard. In some myths, Zeus wants to save someone dear to him. And that feeling is what makes the scene so human. We are used to tragedy when a weak person cannot protect someone they love. But there is something even sadder about watching a powerful figure face loss. A being who can shake the heavens still cannot simply keep every beloved life safe forever. That moment asks a painful question. If you have power, does that mean you can keep everything? If you love someone, does that mean you can protect them from every ending? If you sit at the highest place, are there still losses you must accept? To me, that is one of the harshest and most honest things in Greek mythology. These stories seem grand and distant at first. Gods, monsters, storms, prophecies. But under all of that, they keep returning to truths that feel painfully close. Reaching a high place does not erase fear. Having power does not erase loss. Loving deeply does not guarantee that you can hold on forever. And maybe that is part of why these myths endured for so long. People may have been drawn to divine power, but they may also have found comfort in the idea that even the highest beings had limits. Because if even Zeus could not avoid grief entirely, then maybe grief is not always a sign that we failed. Maybe some losses belong to the shape of life itself. The fates are frightening not because they are cruel, but because they seem so calm. Thunder carries anger, war carries hate, but fate often feels indifferent. One life is long, another ends too soon. One person finds joy late, another carries pain they never asked for. The stories do not always give us a neat moral reason for any of it. And maybe that is exactly why people imagined fate as something greater than personal emotion. There are too many things in life that do not fit simple ideas of fairness. A life that ends too early, a chance that comes too late, pain that lands on someone who did nothing to deserve it, good fortune that arrives without explanation. People see these things and wonder if there is some hand, somewhere, quietly, measuring what cannot be measured. But this is where the story becomes more than just dark. If we read the fates only as symbols of hopelessness, we miss something important. In many ways, the idea of fate is not just a prison. It is also a mirror. It reminds human beings of their place. And strange as it sounds, the fact that life has an end can make life feel sharper, not emptier. If nothing ended, we would delay every choice. If nothing could be lost, love might become lighter, thinner, easier to waste. If death did not exist, courage might lose some of its meaning. So the language of fate is bleak, yes, but it also makes life feel urgent. It gives weight to time. It makes the ordinary feel fragile in a way that can also make it beautiful. Sometimes I think what we fear most is not fate itself, but the fact that we are not fully in control. We make plans. We try to choose wisely. We work hard. We try to become better, kinder, stronger versions of ourselves. And all of that matters. It truly does. But life keeps reminding us that effort, while precious, does not explain everything. There is always some space beyond our plans. Some part of life refuses to be fully managed. That is where old myths still speak to modern people, not because they offer easy answers, but because they understand that feeling. The feeling of reaching the edge of your control and still having to go on. And this is where the story takes on its deepest human meaning. I do not think the Greeks imagined the fates only to frighten people. I think they were also wrestling with human pride. We want to believe we can design everything. our success, our relationships, our future, our safety. We want to believe that if we make the right choices, we can secure the ending we want. But life keeps pushing back against that dream. There will always be something beyond calculation. And once a person accepts that, something changes. Yes, it can make us feel smaller, but it can also make us deeper. A person who knows they cannot control everything is often slower to judge others, more grateful for an ordinary good day, more careful with love, more gentle with someone carrying loss, less likely to offer quick advice, and more willing to sit in quiet understanding. That is why the fates, to me, do not simply stand for despair. They stand for humility. If even Zeus was not completely free, then maybe wisdom does not come from trying to control everything. Maybe it comes from choosing how we meet what we cannot control. We may not get to decide every ending, but we can still ask what kind of person we want to be while we walk toward it. And perhaps that is the deepest question hidden inside this old Greek myth. When you cannot change everything, how will you live? What kind of heart will you keep? What kind of meaning will you build inside the limits you did not choose? Because maybe true strength is not the power to break every limit. Maybe true strength is knowing there are limits, and still refusing to collapse. Zeus holds lightning, but even he cannot wipe away every shadow of fate. Human beings are far weaker. And yet, in some ways, that is exactly why our choices can feel so moving. We love even though nothing lasts forever. We try even though failure is possible. We treasure people even though we know loss is part of life. And maybe that is the most beautiful answer we can give to fate. Not denial, not total surrender, but a quiet kind of courage. So this story is not just about ranking power among gods. It is not simply asking whether Zeus was stronger than the fates. It is asking something much closer to us. Are we as free as we think we are? Does power make everything possible? And if there are things no one can fully escape, what kind of life is still worth living inside that truth? In the end, what the Greeks may have feared was not just a stronger god. It was something far more universal. A force that comes without noise. A force that reaches kings and beggars, heroes and cowards alike. A force that reminds every life it has a limit. And strangely enough, that is also what makes life shine. Because of limits, today matters. The people beside us matter. The words we have not spoken yet begin to feel urgent. Fate may be cold, but sometimes that coldness is exactly what makes life feel warm. So perhaps the deepest meaning of the power that even Zeus could not fully defy is not fear alone. Perhaps it is the question that power leaves behind. If the end is never fully ours to command, then how will we fill the space before it? If some things cannot be changed, then what kind of grace will we carry in front of them? If we cannot hold everything, then what will we choose to hold with all our heart? And that is why the fates still matter in mythology today, not as a dusty image from the distant past, but as a living symbol that still speaks to something very human in us. Quietly spinning, quietly measuring, quietly waiting, not just in story, but in the way we think about time, loss, love, and what it means to live at all.